What's up, everybody? I'm Justin Maytak here with my sister, Melissa Matak,
Hey, everybody.
and we're here with a special guest, Jason Perez from Every Night is Game Night.
Yo, my peoples, what's up?
And today we're doing a roll for thought where we're going to be talking about IPs being used in board gaming.
Yeah, and first I
Wait,
want to say I'm super excited to have Jason Perez on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
this is great, man. Thank you so much for the invite. I really get invited to other people's podcasts. I usually have a billion people on mine, but being invited on somebody else is really exciting. I don't have to edit. Whoop, whoop.
You can if you want. We'll
No,
send you the
Yeah,
no,
we
no,
have
files.
no
do
problem.
not.
No
That is
problem.
not happening. That is not a thing. You guys have
All
fun
right.
with the editing.
All right. Well, for IPs, the first thing I was thinking about was when I kind of came up with a topic, I was thinking about when board games use IPs and it's a terrible game. It's a pure cash grab. Specifically, I was thinking about Stranger Things, and they came out with the gimmicky Eggo box or whatever. And I thought, okay, cool, it goes with the show. And then I found out the game is absolute trash, and I hate when publishers or designers, whatever it might be, do this. It's like, please, please, it could have been such a cool game, Stranger Things, like you have the perfect theme to make an amazing game, and you just didn't.
Yeah, with Stranger Things, like that theme, you have so many options for to make a good game. I guess it kind of reminds me of the Cthulhu theme, and yeah, that's been used a ton in board gaming, but they've made a ton of great games using it. How
That's
did
true.
they screw this up with Stranger Things?
Right. And of course, it's not just Stranger Things. It's tons and tons of games. They even do this in video games, right? It's all about the cash grab and whatnot.
See, I don't know how old you guys are, so I can reveal my age. I'm 42 years old.
Mhm.
I was a kid when the original hot garbage IP game came out, like the paradigm. There is no ever beating this game. I remember going to the store and buying it. It was ET for the Atari
Uh,
2600. So
okay.
this game, like people were so excited about it, and like the movie was just come out. It was all the rage, and Atari, everybody had Atari and everything. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna go play this. And then you play it, and you can't even recognize the pixelated garbage. And you're walking, and you don't know why you're walking because it didn't explain to you why you're walking. And then you fell down a pit, and then you couldn't like move in the pit, and you had to like kind of lift yourself up. And it's like, okay, there's a key here, and like it was just it was a total garbage game. And I think it's like such famous garbage that they buried all the copies in like Arizona or something.
Yeah, I've heard that
I've
story.
heard that. Yes, I
I
Yeah, and
have.
have heard that.
there was recently they someone recently found it, and I think those cartridges they were exhumed and distributed, and that you can now buy it for like $150. That
Oh
original
my
just terrible garbage game. So
Of
like
course.
that was the original IP garbage.
god.
A proud tradition that is signaled by games like your Stranger Things game, which I would have known just to avoid completely. Um,
Yeah. I mean, I
I
didn't
did
play it. I read the reviews first.
I did read a story about like the making of the ET game,
Mhm.
and it makes all the sense in the world. So like when you have an IP, it's usually like a company buys licenses the IP right from the publisher, and like they both kind of have this deadline that they set, and the deadline is usually in coordination with like some big release, or like I'm going to release a movie, we're going to release a toy line, we're going to release the new season of a show, and it's like okay, you have this much time to make a game with this thing. Go. It's like,
Mm.
what am I supposed to
Yeah.
do here? So as opposed to like a regular game where it's like, okay, it's done when it's done. With an IP game, oftentimes it's just there's no time to make it. So it just like, okay, you have 6 weeks to make this thing, and the guy who made the ET game is like, my last game that I made cost was like 50 something weeks. How am I supposed to make a game in six? Like, just
Mm.
figure it out. Don't worry about it. You're good at this thing. Go ahead. And he made a piece of garbage. But it was, and they bankrupt the company. I mean, Atari, like had to go into some sort of full closure. It was a big mess. Um, but it's almost as if people kind of don't learn. It's because you get these kind of failures of varying levels of spectacularity just kind of like pervade. We always seem to be plagued by some kind of like really noteworthy piece of garbage.
That is actually true. But as you were talking, I'm wondering because there's a lot of board games now that are out where they don't have the IP, but it's clearly based off of, some sort of IP. I'm thinking about like Dinosaur Island.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm wondering if it would be more beneficial for the designers or whatever, and I'm not entirely sure of the process, but for the designers to maybe create the game with that IP in mind and then see if they could get the IP. And then if not, you just say, okay, it's not Jurassic Park or whatever. And then you just pump out the game and it's still a good game and and people know what it is anyway.
I mean, it all depends on like what the so I can see a Fantasy Flight, right? So Fantasy Flight has they basically live off their IPs.
Yeah.
And they've
Yeah.
released what was it, Game of like they do when Game of Thrones was hot, they released all these Game of Thrones games. They released a trivia game. They already had the board game from a previous license and like the big map with the area control thing that takes like 7 hours to complete, which is actually a really good game. That's an example of a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
But they also released like Hand of the King, which was this like card thing, and they released a Cosmic Encounter variant. Like they were just like putt crap and stuff out. So that, as you were saying before, like in terms of Dinosaur Island, like here's a game, Cosmic Encounter. It's all negotiation. It's all like back and forth and backstabbing and everything. How can that not fit Game of Thrones? And then they layer Game of Thrones on there, and it is not good. Like so
Okay.
even when you design for the game, it might not end up being very good,
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah,
Although
'cause
Cosmic
also
Encounter came out much earlier than Game of
Sure.
Thrones. Yeah.
yeah, 'cause even with Dinosaur Island, even though I think it was inspired probably from that concept behind Jurassic Park, they didn't have the specific Jurassic Park IP in mind when create. I think at least in terms of the gameplay. And sure, you can spin it on to have the IP of Jurassic Park on there pretty easily. But I wonder how much it's really going to feel like, oh man, this is reminding me of Jurassic Park and what happens in the movies and stuff. Whereas most of it will probably just be minor nods while the mechanics aren't really coming through. So it's not like you can just paste the theme onto a game and have it really feel like the IP. You either have the IP completely there, or I think you don't. Because if you just paste it on, I don't think it'll work that well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of two minds when it comes to that. Like, because I mean, IPs, when you get an IP, it just feels like there's going to be a lot of chefs in the kitchen. You know, it's never like going to be a designer like pitches a thing, and then another place will just, oh, I'm just going to put the IP into the game. Like once you have that IP going, you're going to have all these lawyers, you're going to have the corporations, you're going to have all these people that are kind of like, well, the game should be this, and the game should be marketed this way, and the game should be, you should make it this way, so let's market it this way. I just feel like, and maybe that this is me like being a democratic socialist cynic that is just like down on all corporations ever, but but like it feels like okay, not to say that there aren't great IPs, and we're going to talk about some great IP games, and the best games, I think the corporate side and the deadlines and the targets, like that's where they don't, like where it doesn't interfere. So like I bet a game like Stranger Things, like you were mentioning, it's just like, okay, let's aim this right at target. Let's aim for this many copies pumped out, and it's in this, like they really dictate what it is before the game's even like devised. So, I think that's, in terms of like, talking about IP games, where they go wrong, I think that's where they go wrong, which is too many chefs, too many corporate chefs in the kitchen. Like what you're describing, Justin, is like where people are making that like an inspired game. I don't know that that's like a thing, like where people just like make the game they want and then like they hunt for the IP afterwards.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that
Well,
does make sense.
so we've been talking about a lot of negatives. What about the positives?
It's so fun to talk
Yeah, it
nonsense.
is
It
a
is.
lot of fun to
To
like
just
bash
completely
these
trash,
things.
It's
yeah.
so fun to
Yes.
bellyache.
I love hating on board games. I love it. Like
Who doesn't?
exactly. Like, that's the fun part.
Trashing the corporations as we speak. But
Actually,
what
well,
yeah.
Well, I mean, before I know we're going to talk about some of the good stuff, but like
Mhm.
I do have some games that are better, but they're
Okay.
kind of flawed. So like, because I actually think, and I know I talked about Atari, I think there's some games out there that have IPs, but then they're pretty good, but they just, I feel like they kind of fall short a little bit of the mark. I think in terms of like Harry Potter, Hogwarts Battle. I don't know if you guys have played that one.
I
I
have, yeah.
have.
You have?
I've played it.
Do you like it?
I do like I've only gotten through the first 3 books so far.
Okay.
And they're very, very easy to beat, but I like what it is trying to do, I think.
So like the first 3 games were super easy. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay, what am I doing here? It's like basically Daddy's first deck builder.
Right.
And then you get to book 4 and it's actually good. Like, good. Like
Okay.
they add enough the wrinkles and it's all whatever. And then you get to books 5, 6, and 7 and it's just a slog. Like they just add. They don't subtract anything. And so
Okay.
you end up like being there for 2.5 hours, which is way longer than you need to be like some simple deck builder that can just kill you in 5 minutes. So like
Huh.
I feel like there's a lot of games out there that are pretty good. Like they really try to honor the IP. They're just kind of a little bit underbaked. So I'm thinking of that one. I don't know if you guys have played Thanos Rising, the Avengers game from a couple years ago, the dice roller.
I
I
have.
know it. I
Yeah, I
just
know.
I haven't had interest in playing that one.
You're not an Avengers person. Oh,
I am an Avengers
it
person, but
hurts
the
me. It
game
hurts me.
itself didn't seem all that appealing for me.
I'm
Yeah.
kind of on the Avengers theme.
Oh, really? Oh, man. Well,
I watched all the movies. I liked it. I got tired of it towards the end. So by the time that game came out, I wasn't like super pumped about the theme.
it's a skippable game. it's not bad. It's not bad. It's just another one of those things where it's like the game is decent, but I think like there wasn't a lot of dev time. If that makes
Okay.
Right.
sense.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
the what I was getting from it. It felt like or it looked like a skippable game, so I skipped it.
Yeah. So we're trying to yuck up a little bit. We started by talking a little bit of nonsense, and now
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. I had a feeling you're warming up to talk about some better IPs.
Yeah.
Oh heck yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
good,
Absolutely.
I love
cool.
loving on games. That's what I
Yeah.
do.
There you go. You guys are
Um
yin and yang over there.
yeah. Well, what are some things that we do look for in IPs? What makes a good IP game a good one, I guess, is the question. Like, is it the mechanics? Or is it okay for the mechanics? This is something that I've been thinking about. Is it okay for the mechanics to suffer a little bit to push the theme farther? Is that okay? Like, does it make it more fun? I don't know.
What do you think, Justin?
I'm thinking as of right now, it can't be too forced where the mechanics just feel like super wonky or anything like that. If you can do it well though, absolutely. Like I think that if your mechanics don't make sense towards the theme, you're hurting the game way more than like trying to force. Like the thing that I'm immediately thinking of is just War of the Ring. That's a game that uses an IP and it really uses that IP. Like every aspect of the game really feels like you're using that IP. And one aspect's being the whole playing as Sauron when you're searching for the ring, like as you roll the dice and your eyes come up, like that goes towards the search. That plays into it. Like you actually mentioned to me, Melissa, of how like Sauron's obsessed with finding the ring, kind of thing. Like that didn't
Mhm.
even click to me as I was rolling the dice playing as Sauron. But it's like, yeah, that was awesome, and I don't care that I'm rolling dice and this is happening. Some people might gawk at that and be like, "Oh, you're rolling dice, bad mechanics," something like that. For me, I don't care. I'm like, "Oh my god, that's awesome!" Like, and then I'm losing dice, but I don't care because it's working so nicely towards the theme. And I feel like that's just one small piece of how many things work so nicely towards the theme in War of the Ring.
I think like I'm glad you mentioned that about like how the game feels, and how the mechanics kind of make you feel. All these IPs, like they're not just names. They're not, like we can put Luke and Leia together and make them Funko Pops and just make them fight. And it's, people can call it an IP and that's the end of the day. And that's fine and whatever. Like I remember like I had Sam Healy on my show. He was talking about like beating up Bruce Lee with Blanche from the Golden Girls and
Right,
Funkoverse. It's like,
right.
great, great. But if
He says that all the time. Uh,
he loves that. The Golden Girls, I'm gonna kick your
yeah.
butt. So I mean, you could go that direction with IPs, and that's perfectly cool. But like, if you really want to deliver on an awesome game, you have to kind of know the IP from the inside out. Like, you have to be a real geek for it, and
Mhm.
Yes.
not just like like be familiar. Like the Lord of the Rings is a perfect example because you can approach that game in a reductive way, approach the IP in a reductive way, where it's Lord of the Rings. It's like, oh, it's generic fantasy. Let's just like make things with dwarves and elves and call it Lord of the Rings. And like, if you guys have played Lord of the Rings: Journeys to Middle Earth, the Fantasy Flight game, I
Yeah,
Mhm.
a little
actually
bit.
I kind of think that game veers towards that end of like it's a little like, okay, this is a reskinned Descent. I don't, this isn't Lord of the Rings. This doesn't feel like how the books make me feel. And I don't need the same exact story, but just put me in that space, put me in that world. I like to say put me in the headspace. Headspace is like kind of my thing when it comes to reviews. So like, what's the headspace Lord of the Rings? It's Sauron looking for the ring. It's hobbits like dodging from here to here to here. It's soaked in nonsensical lore, and it's elvish poems that don't make any sense. And it's all these things that you can jam into a game, and if you do it right, it becomes this amazing thing. So like, you really so like, for me, the best IP games take the whole IP seriously, if that makes sense, and then transfer
Absolutely.
that into mechanisms as much as possible.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know one way that Melissa described it was to me before was it felt like there was a lot of love went into War of the Ring, and
Yeah.
whenever you're using an IP, I think that's exactly how it should feel. Like a lot of love went into this game and into this IP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and one thing I'm thinking of though is because I also know for some games, and I do think that a lot of love should go into these games and that it should, or the game should really know the IP and bring it out. But I think that it's also okay to let go of some things of the IP to make a better game. Um, so things like Lord of the Rings, Journeys into My Little Earth, I don't know. Maybe some things needed to be taken out. That way the game itself worked, right? So I'm also thinking of like Battlestar Galactica, right? Some of that stuff wasn't quite in the show, right? It was you're kind of like jumping around, whatever, and then some of the things in the show didn't quite come out, but they made the mechanics work at the expense of some of the story elements, if that makes sense.
I
Absolutely.
feel like with some, like, you don't have to reproduce the IP. You don't have to like be in the world. But I think that there are elements in every IP that make it distinct. And you just kind of need enough of them, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
Battlestar, it's kind of a graduated space adventure. So, and
Mhm.
with the traitor and the Cylons and all that kind of thing, like, I don't need the entire story beat for beat. I just need a little bit of a sense of what that game is, and then make whatever game you want. Like, I happen to think, as an example, Legendary Encounters Alien is a thematic game in the sense
Mm.
that, like, it's legendary. Like, legendary is just a deck builder. Deck builders are not very themeless, but in Alien, the threat row kind of just comes out and it's face down, and then when you reveal the cards, like this, alien, and the art is gnarly, and like, that's not Alien. I mean, there's all sorts of, like, Alien is such a bigger IP than that, but like, that one part that's like core to the experience of watching Alien, the horror movie, which is the first one. Like, just, okay, I don't know what's there, and then I turn the corner and blah, alien, and it rips my face off, and I can't kill it. Like, so in that game, you kind of like, just, you're not really killing aliens, you're just kind of dodging, and score points and everything. Or at least, like, if I remember that 8 game correctly. So I just feel like, you don't have to get everything right. Just isolate enough of the main things of what people enjoy, and then deliver that in your game. And then you can kind of, like you said, but like Melissa, dress up with whatever mechanics you want. Like, if you want to make a deck builder, if you want to make a social deduction game, if you want to make all sorts of games in the IP, there's room for it. Just pick something that is in the actual IP, and they'll just like jam something in there, make it generic or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And the game that I was thinking of while you were speaking was like just kept coming to mind was like Disney Villainous.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
good game, good example.
right? Like because you're not it doesn't feel like you're playing through any of these villains movies or anything like that, but enough of the IP is showing up there in the personal objectives and stuff where it still feels very thematic and true to the IP, though it's not hitting it beat for beat.
Isn't the thing, like, like, if you, as long as Humpty Dumpty are together, and like some card effect happens when they fall off a wall, it's like, that's all really all you need. Like, I like
Yeah.
to think, I like to say, theme is like a magic trick. it's all like, don't look at the numbers, don't look at the card flip, but don't look at the mechanics. Just okay, look at this. Point your brain towards this other thing, and you don't have like the game doesn't have to have all the thematic bits. It doesn't have to like hold you by the hand and drag you bit by bit. Just point me in the right direction. Give me a
Right.
nod. Like, I mean, how do the villainous like some of the decks like just work differently depending on who the hero is or who the character is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
depending on the villain, the deaths are different for each one.
Yeah, so like, just point like if I'm playing Cruella Deville, just like, give me a bunch of little puppies and
Exactly.
yeah, that's all. Like, you don't need more than that.
Yeah.
I have an active imagination. Most of us that are playing games have active imaginations. It's your best resource, game designers. Just, point us in that direction. It's great.
All right. Well, maybe we could head on into what are 3 games that we think are the best at doing just that, adding the IP to the board game with our top 3 list. I was thinking, Justin, you could start it off with your number 3.
All right. Awesome. Quick honorable mention though is War of the Ring because we never played a full game yet, so it couldn't hit the list for me. Couldn't
Yeah,
hit the
I've,
list.
I've played a full game of that, and it absolutely should be a proud place on any list. That game is amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just know it would have hit the list if we had played a full game. That's what's hurting me. So I had to say it. But I didn't order this list that well, honestly. I'm not. It could change at any point, but my number 3 for right now is Mechs versus Minions. It's based off of the League of Legends IP, and honestly, it hits this list because I love League of Legends. I probably have over 2,000 hours of gameplay minimum on that game, and that really is lowballing it. Um, but the game Mechs versus Minions decided to take that IP and not say, "Hey, I'm not remaking League of Legends on a board game." They did not do that, and I love that they didn't do it. They took 4 characters, took different aspects from their lore, gave different nods to the actual in-game abilities, and you're killing minions while pushing bombs along or deading crystals and whatnot. It just had enough nods towards League of Legends, which really shoots it up there for me. And also the component quality is incredible in that game. So yeah, Mets versus Minions.
I love Max
I
vs.
love
Minions. It's great. It did not make it my list, but it's a very good choice.
Yeah. I actually that one slipped my mind, but I do really like that game.
Almost
My
slipped my mind. Almost. Once I remembered that, I was like, nah, gotta hit the list.
Yeah, that's a good one. All right. Well, my number 3, I didn't care that I only played half a game of it. I put War of the Ring just because. And this is why
I
it's my number
need.
3 because we, haven't played it. But I mean, it's just oozing with you. You could tell from the first like 2 minutes of playing it. It's there in spades, and I love it already. Um, and I definitely want to play the full game. We still have it set up in our
Yeah,
basement.
exactly. We still have it set up. We're halfway through, and we both really have felt the theme. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry for calling you out there, Melissa.
No, it's yeah, whatever, bro. But yes, that's my number 3, War of the Ring.
Nice. So my number 3 is a game from. I might be cheating a little bit. It doesn't have the official IP here, but it is so soaked in the IP that I just kind of had to add it in there. It is Street Masters. I don't know if you
Okay.
guys have heard of Street Masters at all.
I have
Actually, yeah,
not.
I've not heard of that one.
Street Masters is from the brothers Sadler, Brady and Adam Sadler from Blacklist Games. It's their first game, and it is based on the Double Dragon IP. If you guys know the Double Dragon video games, the fighting game from yore.
I don't know that game.
You
But
guys
that's
must be
awesome.
young.
We're
I'm
very young.
22.
Oh, you guys are so young. Oh my God.
I'm just a wee boy.
I'm
22.
yeah, I'm 27.
Ah! I gotta fix my list now. I have all old people stuff on here.
No, this is great. We need some
Yeah,
older stuff on this
we need some old
podcast,
blood in here.
please.
So Street Masters Double Dragon is one of the proto side-scrolling fighting games. So like before like the Mortal Kombats and the Tekkens and all that kind of thing, like you had Double Dragon, which was two guys that are side scrolling and like beating a million enemies. The enemies are just flooding on the screen, and you spend the entire time just like kicking butt and like ninja guys. And they ported that to the board game, and the board game really does a good job of not only just like giving you the opportunity to just like beat a whole bunch of bad guys up, but it also does like silly things like the video game used to do. So it's like, okay, you break a box, there's a giant turkey, and you eat the turkey, you get full life. So it's like, okay, in the game you can pull a card, which is a loot card, and have a giant turkey and get to full life. And like it does the video game thing really well. There's very whimsical, but it's also like a really good solid game. It has like lots of card play and miniatures. It's a really, really good game. There's a whole bunch of content for it that I haven't even opened up yet. But I don't have it. There's like a whole like Aftershock box. It's like very, very big. But yeah, no, I love Street Masters. If you like Sentinels of the Multiverse, have you guys heard of that game?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
we've
we
played
played
that a
that
few
one.
times.
Yeah.
This is Sentinels of the Multiverse with a board and with minis and with fighting. So it's very, very good.
Yeah, that
That
actually
does sound
sounds
really
pretty
cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
It's super good.
Awesome.
So Street Masters from the Sadler Brothers.
All right. So my number 2 was mentioned before. It is Disney Villainous. So Disney Villainous is a game where each player takes on the role of a Disney villain, and you have your own personal objective with your own normal villain deck, and then a fate deck that other players can flip bad things onto you. The theme just comes out, especially with your personal objectives. Like a very basic intro one is the Prince John character, where he's obsessed with money. So you win the game if you start your turn with 20 coins. Uh, and there's a whole bunch of different things like that. Like Jafar needs to start his turn with a couple of items and the genie under his control, things like that. I also love that idea of you have to start your turn with these things in order. So you see that you have it, and then you go a full round of people trying to stop you from being able to win. That's really exciting for me. I really enjoy that. And I think that you really get to feel like you're playing a Disney villain. So yeah, my number 2, Disney Villainous.
I've only played it once. It was super fun. I'd love to play it more.
Melissa hates it. I think
She does not. Does she hate it?
we had a whole sibling rivalry on it. So people argue that it overstays its welcome. I don't think it does. She thinks it definitely does, which is just absurd. It's ridiculous. It's a completely biased opinion. It's disappointing.
As opposed to
Honestly.
yours, which is completely objective and
So
down the
I like to
line.
base my things off of facts and research.
There you go. Got it.
She does it off of feelings.
No, 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 no. I do not hate this game. I enjoy it. It does overstay its welcome, and that's all I'll say about that.
Okay.
My number 2 is Fury of Dracula, specifically 4th edition, because that's the only edition I've played, from
the same
WizKids.
as third edition. It's not different.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Only the minis come painted, so better. No.
Absolutely.
Better.
I think that it definitely brings out that feeling of you're Dracula, you're trying to make your army of vampires, or if you're playing the hunters, you're really feeling like, oh my God, where is this guy? I gotta find him, hunt him down, put a stake through his heart, gaining your items. I really love this game. I love to play it. It's one of the few games I really like to play with what's it called? Like music on. What am I
Mhm.
like atmospheric music.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I love vampires. So that's another plus for me. So that's my number 2, Fury of Dracula, 4th edition.
My number 2 is you mentioned, I think it was Justin that mentioned the Arkham Files
Yes.
IP. And so there are many, many games to choose from.
Yes.
There's a ton of them. Some of them bad, but a lot of them good. And I think that in terms of servicing an IP, video games kind of do it the best, and we kind of talk about why and whatever. But I'm going to pick Eldritch Horror. So the reason I'm
Okay.
picking Eldritch Horror
Okay.
is it's the least Lovecrafty Like I'm not a horror guy, so I'm kind of sick of Cthulhu. What I like about Eldritch Horror though is that I'm not a huge horror guy. So like the stuff with the tentacles and the blood and all that kind of thing. I can whatever. I'm not a huge big fan of that, and I think that Cthulhu is overplayed. However, Eldritch Horror feels like Indiana Jones, the board game. Now, Indiana Jones, I love. That is my stuff. I love the archaeologist. I love the world-spanning adventure. I love the getting into hijinks and summoning monsters and getting artifacts and you're mad, but it's kind of like kooky as opposed to trying to get some sort of dark reaction out of you. So I love what Eldritch Horror does with the IP, and I happen to think in terms of the IP that gets serviced the best. I think it is Cthulhu and Lovecraft and everything, only because it's so broad. Like you can go in so many different directions with it. Like you can go in the mystery direction. You can go into the kooky blue. I could stick my hand in front of my face and make the tentacle thing, and some Cthulhu now, and be goofy. But I can also do this adventurous thing, which is make me feel like a hero and everything. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why, and of course we have to mention that Cthulhu is free. It's in the public domain. It hit the public domain a long time ago, and you don't have to buy the license. You don't have to answer to a corporation, those dirty corporations that I was mentioning before. You can do whatever you want with it, and it's rich enough and broad enough so that you can do a lot of different games with it. So I picked Eldritch Horror. You could have picked a lot of different games. I know my community would probably pick Arkham Horror, the living card game, in this slot as the best thematic Cthulhu game. I just think that's too expensive, and it's just there's just so many cards. You have to keep up with the living card game. Not that Eldritch Horror is cheap, but you can get away with having a full game experience with the base game and an expansion, as opposed to the LCG, where it's this kind of pull to constantly buy for it. So that's just a personal preference. I mean, people love the card game. I like the card game. So, but I will go with Eldritch Horror as my number 2. Why Cthulhu is and why it serves the Cthulhu theme the best. So before we can go on to our number ones, if I can impose upon you guys, how do you guys like Cthulhu, and do you like Cthulhu in your games?
I personally do like Cthulhu, although we haven't played all that much Cthulhu. I've played the card game, I played regular Arkham Horror, I've not played Eldritch. And I love the horror theme, so it's sort of right up my alley. And I like it. I like that it's a free IP that people can use and really delve into. And I like the whole notion of, you know what, sometimes bad things just happen. And it's perfect for board games that a lot of times use dice in this sort of Ameritrash, whatever. It's perfect because, yeah, sometimes you just get bad dice rolls and life happens, and how are you going to deal with that? Which is really, really cool for me. And I personally really like the Arkham Horror card game. So, um, yeah, that's what I think about it.
Really like the card game. It's just I can't keep up with it.
That's totally fine. It's fine. Me neither.
Yeah. With what Melissa said, I feel like I haven't played enough Cthulhu games to be tired of it yet, and I also do enjoy the horror theme. And a game that almost hit my list but didn't make it was Pandemic Cthulhu.
Oh, come on, bro.
I don't know why of all
It's
the
worst
pandemic.
pandemic.
Exactly. Everybody says that, and I'm just like, no, it's not. It's actually kind of no. It's not kind of fun. Don't no. See, this is what people do. They make you doubt yourself. It is fun. It's not just kind of fun.
I
That
agree
red
with
shell
Justin on
on
this one.
you.
It doesn't get the love it deserves.
Exactly. It's a good pandemic game. You know what else doesn't get the love it deserves? Just really quick, is Fall of Rome. By
Oh
the
my
way,
god.
Pandemic Cthulhu does not get the love it deserves, and also, yeah, no, people just don't respect Cthulhu and Fall of Rome enough. Like, I,
Absolutely
I
love
like.
Fall of Rome. I play it still. It's a great game.
I mean, I appreciate that, but that doesn't, really amend what you said before about Pandemic Cthulhu.
I have to like 3 of your games to make up for that one.
There you go. But I actually do like the Cthulhu theme. I'm not a big fan of Arkham Horror, but we've also played it with like 7 people too many times now. So
Yeah, no thanks.
yeah, no thanks. Exactly. Yep. No thanks.
Yeah, I won't do that again.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, if I had to pick, like, because I do a series in my show called Best in Class. If I had to pick like a best in class IP and games that service the IP, as much as it pains me because I don't love the Arkham Files, it's probably Arkham. There's more good games for that IP for various reasons, and a lot of it being, because it's free. But
yeah.
it's just like that IP is just so much more well serviced than a lot of other ones.
Yeah. That IP clearly has just gotten a lot of love in the games that's been made. Like the development in these games they've had a few just bangers kind of thing. Like I think there's got to be at least 2 or 3 games that are in the top 100 on BGG that use that IP. Probably
Like
more.
5.
Yeah, I was like I
A whole
started
bunch.
thinking about more and more. It's like no, there's definitely more. I think that's really impressive.
All right, so let's get to our number ones. We're getting on number ones. I'm excited.
All right, my number one was brought up by Melissa. It's the best edition. It's Fury of Dracula 4th edition. Don't get 3rd edition. It's trash now. 4th edition's where it's at. Colored minis for days. Now, but Fury of Dracula is the hidden movement in the game really made it for me. Like seeing Dracula put down those cards was just really exciting. Like when you see them put down like a water card, and I believe Dracula takes damage when he goes
Yeah.
into water, right? Like that aspect, so much of it is very exciting, but also you kind of feel that theme of like Dracula just, you know, moving around secretly while 4 hunters are chasing, and like there's Van Helsing and 3 other hunters. I don't remember their names, but still it's really cool to read about them and stuff when you play the game. And like Melissa said, also playing with the music in the background really amplifies the game, like just adds this level of intensity, and that the whole timer works really well. So yeah, my number one, Fury of Dracula.
All right. Well, I completely agree with that pick, obviously. My number one has shown up on almost all of my lists, and I already spoke about this a little bit earlier. I nodded to it. It is Battlestar Galactica, the board game. This is one of the games that really, I guess, brought us into the hobby, that in pandemic, but Battlestar Galactica is oozing with the show's theme. I love the show. I had watched the show first, and then when I found out that there's a board game on it, I was like, "What?" So then I played it, and it was so awesome. I was like, "Wow, like board games could do this with the trader aspect, which was new to me, and just seeing how a board game can really bring an IP to life and have you feel like, yeah, I'm in this world right now that somebody else created. And I feel that tension of, are you a Cylon? Are you a skin job? I'm not the skin job, you know? And it was just so much fun. Love this game forever and always. My number one is Battlestar Galactica, the board game.
Never played it.
You never played it?
Oh no, it's too
Uh,
long. So
no,
long.
you're missing out. It's
You're
great.
missing out.
I have played much of Dead of Winter, though. I know that is an echo, that game of PSG.
Yeah, it's okay. I like Dead of Winter, but I really think that BSG is so much better. I know that the time length is off, which is actually why we don't play it nearly as much as we used to, but yeah, I don't know. I just think it's better.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I will. I mean, it's on my to-do list. I mean, I have a giant list of games that I want to play, especially cooperative games. I know that's semi-co-op. I count it. So I definitely want to play BSG at some point. I just found out that you guys live in Brooklyn, New York. So at some
Woo
point,
woo! Woohoo!
when I'm in Brooklyn and you guys are playing BSG, hit me up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Cool. So my number one is kind of a okay. So the 2 games that I picked were not like licensed games. They were IP games, but they were like officially licensed. So I figured, let me not do the dodge thing of like just inspired by games. Like let me pick an actual license, a corporation, talk to a game designer and say, okay, here, do your best. So I picked one, and It actually is a little bit like the game that you guys identified, War of the Ring, but it's Star Wars. Star Wars Rebellion.
Nice.
So I
I've not played yet.
I really love this game. I don't love Star Wars. I'm not a Star Wars guy. I'm more of a fantasy guy, Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and Game of Thrones and stuff. So space doesn't really get me. However, I do like the movies. And that game, either side, like whether you're the Rebels or you're the Imperium, I really dig it. And I have enough, familiarity with the characters. So like when Jabba's hunting around and captures Princess Leia, because you can have them as people, and like the basic card plays is fun. You can kind of like have like these all out, land wars on Hoth and stuff. It's like, or on a Dagobah, and it's like, oh my, this is so good. I mean, and it has that tension of the clock, the round ticker is going on and everything. Oh man, it's a really, really good game. I cannot recommend it enough. It's like number 5 on the BGG list, but it's completely deserved. But like no one talks about it. I'm happy to talk about it. Is Star Wars Rebellion is amazing.
I feel like people are talking about it. I don't know, but that is a game that I've been really wanting to play. I'm a Star Wars fan. I mean, I watch the movies. I haven't read the books or anything. I like Star Wars. I love the space theme. It's one that it was sort of, okay, am I getting War of the Ring first or Star Wars Rebellion? And then we went with War of the Ring because we're more fantasy driven. But yeah, that's probably the next big two-player game.
As playing 2-player games a lot, then yeah, that's a no-brainer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I sneak in some honorable mentions.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Big Trouble in Little China, the board game.
Mhm.
If you guys are aware of
Yeah.
that movie, I know the more old people movies.
Yeah. I know Sam Healy's talked about it, so I know about it.
Is that the one in black and white now?
Yeah, subtitles is done by mimes. uh, silent movie. No, it's a very, it's a thematic, fun dice chucker. There's not, you don't take it that seriously. I've only played like a demo of it, but I just from what I played of it, and like being a fan of 80s schlocky movies, really good. You guys actually I had Fear of Dracula listed here, so I did not ignore Fear of Dracula. I like that game a lot. Nemo's War, in terms of a game that's based on a book, and I know that's a little bit stretching the definition of license and IP and everything, but yeah, it's a book, and I think that I love Nemo's War as much dice rolly fun, and like a lot of weird things happen. Sons of Anarchy for TV. I don't know if you guys were fans of the show Sons of Anarchy.
No, never
No,
watched it.
I know of it, but I was never interested in watching it.
That's, as we were talking about before, like, it doesn't have to be the exact thing, just like, give me a couple of elements. Like this one does like the motorcycles and the drug deals and the bags of money, the street brawl, and that's a really fun one, like kind of underrated. It's one of those games that could have been terrible, because like, okay, here's a game not advertised, and I see it on a shelf, and it's like, ugh, that product's probably bad. You play it, it's actually pretty good. And then I just played this game, and it's not the best game, but I admired what it tried to do, and I think it was okay. God of War, the card game. Are you guys
I
video
really want to
gamers
try
anymore?
that one.
Yeah, I played God of War, and I want to
Yeah.
try that one as well. Have not
Yeah.
gotten a chance yet.
Well, it's a deck builder, and so you have to kind of deck builders they're not. I don't find deck builders very thematic. You have to really do a lot, and so what God of War does is they take the boss battles. So like there's a lot of boss battles, especially in the God of War, the PS4 game.
I haven't played 4 yet. I don't have a PS4.
Right. So it's based on 4. So you're playing like, with old Kratos and the kid, and you're basically playing against bosses, and it's total cooperative, which I like. And there's a tableau of cards, and they kind of all fit together to make like a big mosaic of a boss, and then you beat different parts of the boss and you flip the card. So it simulates like the boss changing, like the phase changes of a boss battle. And I thought that was a cool way to kind of handle that. It's not a perfect game. I moved it on to a friend of mine because he enjoyed it more, but I'll play it again. And in terms of an IP game, that could have sucked, and it
Yeah.
didn't suck. And I was really appreciative that like a licensed game did something cool, gave you innovation, and was fun. So I definitely recommend God of War as well.
All right. Well,
So there you go, some good IP games. I
yeah.
like that. That's
Yeah,
fun.
for sure. I need to play the God of War game. That's a
It is a
must
strong
play for
word.
me.
I
No,
think you'll
for
have. I think it's fun. I think it's a
I
fun game.
I really loved the God of War IP, so it's like that one's just it's a must try for me.
Yes,
Like, I don't need to
absolutely.
own it, but I need to play it at some point.
I did have one honorable mention. It was going to actually be Villainous. That's how much I don't hate it. Uh, it almost made the list, but then I was like, man, more of the Ring though. But yeah, that was one of my honorable mentions. All right. Well, Jason, thank you so much for coming onto our podcast and talking with us and hanging with us.
This was a ton of fun, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, man.
Where can people find you?
I'm glad you asked. Thank you very much. So I am user Pope6 over on BGG. People send me geek mails every once in a while. I kind of like to receive those. Every Night is Game Night is my podcast. We are on episode 175. Our most recent episode was with Sam Healy. We are part of the Dice Tower. So the Dice Tower is how I met Melissa and Justin, how I met Sam, and I have a lot of those guys on there. Every Night is Game Night is kind of solo co-op. That's like my taste in games. So we do a lot with the solo community. We do a lot with the co-op community. You can see me also at Every Night is Game Night Facebook group. You can go ahead and join that group, give me a like and a follow and all that kind of thing. ENGN_podcast on the Twitter. I'm not terribly active on these things, but I'm active enough. I'd like to think, maybe, hopefully. But I'm
Same.
definitely very reachable. So if you ever wanted to kind of reach out to me directly, then I'm more than happy to interact. And that's exactly what happened. I put out a thread on Twitter. Melissa responded, and like within a half hour, we're like, okay, we're gonna go on each other's show. So that was awesome.
All right. Well, thank you. This has been another Roll for Thought. Thank you so much for listening. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Melissa McCack. Let us know what you think about IP games. What are your favorite IP games? You've been listening to Room 51.